Welcome back. The tutorial is too tough begins where a brutal tutorial looms ahead, its crushing difficulty overwhelming even the strongest contenders. A cloudy, overcast sky hangs above, with faint patches of light struggling to break through the heavy gloom. Beneath the dim, overcast sky, a quiet street stretches empty between tall buildings, wrapped in a muted, uneasy stillness. Some choices might lead to success, but others demand sacrifices and hard lessons in this unforgiving tutorial world. Some paths end in hopelessness, setting a grim tone for the challenges ahead in this harsh tutorial world. The quiet and contemplative dark-haired boy silently looks ahead, his eyes fixed on the uncertain path before him. The dark-haired boy chose the path filled with endless despair and extreme challenges, accepting the harshest trial ahead. Against the gloomy, cloud-filled sky, a determined young man with black hair stands resolute, his sword strapped firmly across his back. The ominous text declares the brutal challenge known as the Hell difficulty, setting a dark tone for the deadly trial ahead. The introspective young man stared silently, his focused blue eyes reflecting deep thought under the soft light. The reflective and regretful narrator admitted their entrapment in this world stemmed from one foolish decision. The lone traveler carrying a sword walked calmly down the empty cobblestone street, lined with tall, silent buildings. A large building loomed over the empty street beneath a heavy, cloudy sky, its many windows dark and still. The empty bar waited silently, its wooden counter and shelves lined with bottles untouched in the dim light. A confident dark-haired man carrying a sword entered through the doorway, calm and determined beneath the bright backlight. Shadows stretched across the dimly lit floor, the silence broken only by the faint creak of a nearby table. The determined dark-haired man sat at the table and pulled a strap, his sheathed sword resting on his back, ready for what was to come. A confident and relaxed hand flicked a bottle cap into the air beside a bottle and glass. The focused young man lifted a cup steadily, preparing for what was to come with unwavering resolve. A serious and focused male character said the word community with clear intention. A calm and observant dark-haired man examined a clipboard covered with sticky notes, carefully reviewing its contents. The computer screen displayed a loading symbol beneath the Community tab, signaling a pause before new information appeared. 10 minutes remain before new challengers enter this world, and the next session begins. The calm dark-haired man sipped from his cup, his gaze steady and attentive as he prepared for what lay ahead. The screen now displays player counts for each lobby: easy, normal, hard, and a single completion in Hell difficulty. The screen now shows the hard lobby nearly full with 46 players, and the Hell lobby occupied by one solitary challenger. The narrator warned that a new session was about to begin, possibly bringing another player into the deadly tutorial world. The serious young man in a black suit held a glass, focused on the challenge only he faced, the unforgiving Hell difficulty. A teasing voice questioned the waiting young man with dark hair about expecting a new player who wasn't coming. The focused young man typed on the glowing keyboard, suggesting the player had reached the 90th floor on hard difficulty. In the tense quiet, an uncertain figure voiced doubt about whether anyone else would actually come. The focused figure typed swiftly on the laptop, clicking the Community tab to connect with others in the online world. The confused and unaware newcomer typed carefully, admitting he had been dragged into this world without any prior knowledge. The bold and defiant challenger declared that only a crazy person would pick the Hell difficulty besides himself. The serious and focused young man stared intently ahead, his determination sharpening with every passing moment. The indifferent figure dismissed the situation with a sharp, uncompromising whatever. The focused and resolute young man stared intensely, his determination burning brighter than ever before. The digital timer hit 0, signaling the start of the 81st session and unleashing the impending challenge. The system announced the start of the 81st session, signaling the next phase of the deadly tutorial challenge. The worried young man wiped sweat from his brow, silently weighing the dangers ahead with mounting tension. The anxious young man glanced sideways, sweat tracing his temple as hidden threats seemed to close in around him. The focused and inquisitive man examined the glowing community tab on the computer screen, noticing several unread messages waiting for his attention. The blurred background hinted at swift movement, with the text L Lobby 1-2 barely visible through the haze. Dark streaks of light converged silently in the void, drawing all attention toward a distant point beyond reach. The desperate dark-haired young man pleaded urgently for others to look at the boards above. A confused figure wondered aloud if they had entered the hell difficulty setting of the challenge. A faint glow emerged from indecipherable text, hinting at secrets buried deep within the shadowed void. The surprised young man looked down at a glowing object and asked if it was the one he sought. A regretful figure admitted too, and worried they were doomed to go straight to hell, asking what they should do next. The nervous, dark-haired man pleaded silently for his life, eyes glued to the glowing laptop screen filled with hostile messages. A vast colonnade of white classical pillars extended endlessly, casting serene shadows across the silent expanse. The indecisive and uncertain figure wondered aloud what course of action to take next. A contemplative blue-haired girl knelt under towering white columns, carefully examining a glowing wand in her hand. The nervous blue-haired woman explained her side, clarifying her perspective with hesitant gestures. The surprised and alarmed blue-haired girl noticed something was moving and voiced her shock quietly. A mysterious presence offered calm reassurance, telling the audience not to be too scared. The worried blue-haired woman wiped sweat from her brow, her anxiety mounting as the tension in the room thickened. The engaged typing hands moved swiftly over the laptop keyboard, focused on the urgent task at hand. The focused young man with black hair gestured calmly as he explained the plan to the group, his voice steady and confident. The shocked blue-haired girl reacted with disbelief at the sudden and unexpected news. The studious dark-haired man read intently from a glowing book at the empty tavern's bar counter under the dim light. The pensive dark-haired man sat alone, studying a glowing object on the bar table beside a bottle of alcohol. The determined young man with dark hair and blue eyes spoke firmly inside the wooden room, ready to face whatever challenge awaited him next. An unseen voice asked what starting weapon the dark-haired man had chosen. A surprised blue-haired woman uttered a brief sound, reacting sharply to something unseen. An unseen speaker mentioned a bow without revealing more, heightening tension in the silent, suspenseful space. The nervous and focused dark-haired boy's face tightened with worry as a single bead of sweat traced down his temple. The narrator explained that the early parts of the tutorial must be completed strictly through solo play. The narrator revealed that only a professional archer could survive the brutal, hell mode challenges in the tutorial world. An unseen character expressed doubt about the bow's quality, asking if it was really that bad. The dark-haired young man sat alone, studying a glowing green object amid empty bottles, lost in thought at the bar counter. Urgency erupted as an unknown voice suddenly shouted a sharp warning. The worried young man's blue eyes darted anxiously, sweat beading on his brow as tension gripped the air around him. The thoughtful dark-haired man explained that archers tend to have a high survival rate in dangerous situations. The surprised blue-haired woman reacted sharply to the glowing futuristic device, questioning its reality with disbelief. A reassuring and comforting voice told the listener not to worry about it too much. The determined young man shouted fiercely that defeating him would require much harder effort. An unseen voice commanded everyone to trust only them and ignore all others from now on. The pensive blue-haired character sat silently, lost deep in thought without a word or movement. The reflective and uncertain blue-haired character questioned why everything had led to this moment. The determined young man affirmed their decision with a clear gesture, signaling readiness to face what lay ahead. The calm and thoughtful blue-haired girl explained that things were a bit different than expected. Narrator revealed that many Hell Mode survivors existed in other countries. An unknown voice questioned if survival was even possible in this relentless trial. The surprised and attentive blue-haired woman reached out cautiously, sensing something unexpected nearby. A focused and cautious dark-haired man sat alone at a dim counter, studying a glowing green card beside his sword and bottle. Then the narrator or guide calmly stated they would explain starting from the first floor. Engaged and focused on typing, the figure's hands moved swiftly across the keyboard under intense, focused lighting. A determined figure vowed to redeem a long-standing debt beneath the soft glow of white and blue light. A relieved unseen character exhaled softly against a blurred, bright backdrop. The anxious young man gripped his shield tightly, breathing heavily in the dim corridor, readying himself for whatever threat lurked ahead. The dark-haired young man stood surrounded by swords, questioning if this strange place was merely a dream. The injured and shocked young man screamed in pain after a sudden, fiery chest wound. He recalled fragmented memories from a day that felt distant, yet sharply etched in his mind. The determined young man with black hair and blue eyes spoke decisively, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. A pale hand reached downward into the dark, glowing void, uncertain but determined to grasp something unseen. An unseen speaker declared their plan to eliminate targets one by one. The screen displayed logos of FANSIA and Endolphin, accompanied by a clear Korean copyright warning below. The narrator introduced Lee Ho, a 26-year-old man, marking a clear moment in the story's unfolding cast. The angry man yelled aloud in sharp pain, near a cracked stone wall bathed in warm light. The narration revealed the character's past role as a former pro gamer, setting context without showing any characters. Demanded the blue dragon spirit back from the shadowed figure, who challenged her to fight for it. The exhausted but persistent figure panted heavily, struggling to catch his breath after a relentless effort. The worn-out young man braced himself with a round shield, panting heavily in the dimly lit alley. A mysterious and menacing presence lunged forward in the dark space, filled with glowing particles. The determined and defensive young man kicked a sinister dark arm, emerging aggressively from the ground in the shadowy corridor. The injured and agonized young man screamed while clutching his bleeding leg, overwhelmed by sharp, unbearable pain. The injured but determined young man grimaced sharply in pain, blood and sweat streaking his face as he fought through agony. The sinister and attacking shadowy figure struck the in pain and vulnerable young man's leg fiercely, causing a sharp and agonizing scream. An urgent and alarmed figure shouted to alert others about the lobby. The desperate and determined figure gripped the sword tightly, insisting he had to get back to somewhere important with urgency. The injured and in severe pain brown-clothed man clutched his bleeding hand with agony amid the relentless rain. The desperate figure felt the pain sharply and wondered aloud what might happen if death came here. An unidentified character exhaled forcefully, tension thickening the dark and intense air around him. A notification appeared, declaring the dark, blurry world had granted the dark-haired boy increased tolerance for pain. A determined and aggressive figure clenched a fist near a sword, preparing for a deadly strike in the tense silence. The determined and resolute dark-haired person vowed firmly that they couldn't allow this to happen. The determined and struggling young man clenched his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he prepared to push through unbearable pressure. A red and silver blade gleamed sharply, its edge promising swift and deadly precision. The narrator expressed deep confusion, questioning where everything had vanished without a trace. The narrator questioned if everything they believed so far was actually wrong. The word obviously slammed across the scene, emphasizing a truth no one dared to question. That day marked the sudden emergence of a mysterious window nobody expected or understood. A sudden realization gripped the narrator, focusing intensely on everything unfolding clearly before his eyes. A faint structure loomed in the near-empty white expanse, its outline barely breaking the silence. A row of identical cans marked Yua Chai stood silently on the reflective surface in the dimly lit room. The emptiness stretched wide, broken only by a dark corner hinting at the next step in this silent, anticipating void. The screen glowed ominously, revealing the brutal hard, hell difficulty level awaiting the dark-haired young man. A sudden, intense thought warned the dark-haired young man that he shouldn't proceed any further. The narrator emphasized the regret of not choosing differently in the past. The confused and powerless dark-haired man clutched his strange wound, wondering if it caused his sudden loss of fighting ability. The struggling and possibly injured dark-haired figure coughed weakly into the darkness, his breath ragged and desperate. The gray person clutched his arm as a spreading black substance leaked onto the floor, signaling a terrible affliction taking hold. A large black ink blot spread rapidly, swallowing the surrounding area in shadow and deepening the ominous darkness. The worn-out but gaining resilience dark-haired, exhausted boy lay against the brick wall, as system messages confirmed new pain tolerance and hemorrhage resistance. The injured and desperate young man grimaced sharply in pain, cursing his worsening condition. A bright, radiating light burst outward, prompting an unseen narrator to question its sudden appearance in the dark void. A bright light radiated outward, signaling the final moment and wrapping the intense ordeal in a quiet, resolute conclusion. A gloved hand reached upward, cutting through the glowing brightness with fierce determination. The page displayed a stylized Korean title with sleek blue technological designs, signaling a new chapter's start. The city skyline basks softly in sunset hues, the building standing quietly beneath a colorful, fading sky. A passionate and frustrated man on screen gestured wildly, insisting the situation was not as expected. The focused young man drained a can, surrounded by empty ones, tension thick in the air as he sat at his computer desk. The frustrated and restless figure threw several empty cans onto the desk, cluttered with 3 blank monitors and a laptop. 2 years earlier, a tired young man slouched deeply in a cluttered room bathed in harsh computer light. The frustrated dark-haired boy clenched his forehead tightly, struggling against the mounting tension and pain within him. The narrator stated the fact that someone or something was considered as the best. The confident young man with headphones crossed his arms, standing firmly beside 2 smiling teammates ready for what's next. The shocked and desperate white-haired woman reached out frantically toward the bright glowing skull, rejecting its presence with a cry of denial. A worried and responsible adult carried the unconscious and vulnerable child, asking if he was all right and apologizing for the trouble. A reflective and solitary young man stands alone beneath the falling snow, the cold silence pressing on his thoughtful shoulders. The young man slouched at his cluttered desk, declaring his life was unbearably boring. A dim blue fabric rests quietly over a rough wooden surface, untouched and still in the silent room. A tired and contemplative young man with dark hair stared across a desk strewn with empty cans, toward a glowing computer screen. The serious and cautious dark-haired boy glanced sideways, wary of something unseen nearby. A massive sinkhole swallows city buildings, spreading fear as the phenomenon appears worldwide without warning or explanation. The confident and determined youth challenged Sora, but the confident rival replied that there was no chance he would win. The calm and observant young man explained he managed to match the cans he found nearby. Dark, textured shadows pulse silently. An ominous presence wraps the scene in foreboding stillness. The dark blue and purple shadows deepen, swallowing all light without a single sound or movement. A bright yellow light pulses below a dark ceiling, casting an eerie glow in the silent, suspenseful room. A dark-haired young man startled at a glowing message, inviting him to the tutorial world, addressed to Sir Lee Ho. The dark-haired boy's blue eyes widened as shock and fear him in the tense silence. A focused and serious female assassin ordered the rescue mission and demanded notification upon reaching the hostage's location. The shocked young man stared at the glowing screen and questioned what the strange message could possibly mean. A corner of a glowing frame shimmered softly, scattered sparkles hinting at hidden secrets beyond the screen's edge. A hesitant figure questioned if this was truly the game they were about to play. A notification invited Sir Lee Ho to enter the tutorial world, asking if he wished to accept the challenge. The screen darkened, presenting a stark choice between yes or no in bold white letters. He smiled nervously, doubting his own senses and wondering if he was hallucinating. The newly invited player to the tutorial world faced a prompt asking if he would accept the invitation to enter this mysterious realm. A hand pressed the screen, interacting with Korean text displayed clearly before it. The shocked newcomer stared at the glowing screen, realizing he had received a direct invitation to the tutorial world addressed to Sir Lee Ho. The shocked and anxious dark-haired boy's blue eyes widened as sweat dripped down his face in sudden alarm. The system prompted the user to select the tutorial difficulty, highlighting the option labeled Easy. The game screen now shows 3 difficulty options stacked: Normal, Hard, and the ominous Hell at the bottom. A worried young man with dark hair bit his thumb, sweat tracing anxious lines down his face. The tense young man with black hair stared down, sweat betraying his worry as he silently weighed his next move in the deadly tutorial world. A dark blue striped background displays a single Korean word, signaling a pause in the tense atmosphere. Lee Ho, a determined young man, declared his identity with unwavering resolve despite the sweat tracing his face. A finger pointed down sharply, selecting the difficulty levels labeled Normal, Hard, and Hell against a dark blue backdrop. A quiet blue gradient fills the panel, scattered with faint, distant lights that hint at vast emptiness beyond. A grieving daughter demanded why the cold man had killed her mother, insisting her mother meant everything to her. The determined and ready-to-fight female fighter claimed she had a secret power and refused to lose to the strong and confident male opponent. A dark spiky-haired boy excitedly showed a customized wand with glowing symbols to a curious boy with dark hair in a red jacket. The extremely powerful queen emitted such a potent aura that all knights and subjects trembled before her, without uttering a word. An unknown voice urgently urged everyone to look, commanding attention in the dark and ominous silence. The desperate and commanding man yelled urgently at someone unseen, demanding they open their eyes immediately. The dark-haired young man fixed his glowing blue eyes forward, his intense gaze sharp with unwavering determination. The surprised dark-haired young man reacted with shock to an unknown event, while 2 others sat silently nearby. The worried man in the beige suit urgently called out to the others, demanding their attention. The determined young man with black hair pulled his arm across his chest, bracing himself defensively against the looming threat. The shocked and anxious black-haired boy struggled to believe what was unfolding before him. The confused young man asked where they were, his voice trembling as two men nearby watched him carefully without answering. The anxious, dark-haired boy questioned the others about being on the first floor of the tutorial. The stern and commanding blue-haired man ordered everyone to get down immediately. The confident man in a beige suit leaned forward and asked the quiet, dark-haired young man why the window wasn't popping up. The surprised, dark-haired young man questioned if everyone else had also received the holographic message. The distressed and frustrated man in the beige suit grimaced sharply, showing pain directed towards himself as the detached blonde man turned away silently. The observant and calm girl with orange eyes noted there was another girl nearby. The concerned and earnest blue-haired man pleaded with the nervous, dark-haired person to share any information he might have. The curious and observant blue-haired boy pointed out a strange hole that had suddenly appeared nearby. The blonde-haired boy reacted with surprise to the worried dark-haired boy's words, clearly shocked by the unexpected information. The blonde-haired boy questioned if they were trapped because of the hordes, clearly confused by the situation. The calming presence urged the irritated and restless blonde man to settle down, while the alert and tense black-haired man watched carefully. The stern and authoritative man in a beige suit confronted the hesitant and uneasy dark-haired man, who gestured uncertainly toward him. The anxious blue-haired young man admitted he had been completely drunk just a moment ago. The serious dark-haired man gestured while explaining something important to the group. A worried young man clenched his fist near his mouth, questioning something with anxious hesitation. The inquiring and uncertain blue-haired man asked if the calm and focused dark-haired man had chosen his weapon yet. The man in suit seriously informed the surprised dark-haired man that it concerned his weapon. Again, the weapon selection screen prompted the player to choose their starting weapon. The focused and intense dark-haired boy stared intently ahead, determination burning bright in his piercing blue eyes. A young man stood barefoot in the weapons room, surprised by the varied swords, tridents, spears, and axes displayed around him. The shocked and angry young man yelled at the weapons display, demanding to know what would happen to those other people. A spacious armory revealed countless swords, bows, and polearms, leaving the dark-haired boy amazed by the deadly arsenal before him. The introspective young man walked barefoot through the room, silently studying the varied weapons and shield resting on the pedestals around him. 3 weapons, a sword, a hammer, and a spear, rest silently on broken stone tables in a dim, ancient chamber. A lone bow rested quietly on a white surface, bathed in soft glowing light that hinted at calm before the storm. A confident and intrigued figure smirked while contemplating the idea of a game world. The narrator asked what choice should be made next, presenting a bright burst that demanded a decisive answer. The confident young man with black hair smiled, while bringing his thumb close to his lips in a casual gesture. The determined young man with black hair confidently surveyed the vast armory filled with swords, spears, bows, and axes. The narrator asked the tense decision point again, urging the listener to choose their path forward carefully. The page displays bold blue Korean text with digital elements on a clean white background, signaling a title or important announcement. The thoughtful young man with black hair examines various weapons displayed on stone pillars, reflecting carefully on which might suit his needs. The thoughtful young man with black hair touches his head, lost in deep contemplation about the difficult choices ahead. A defensive and protective knight blocks the attack from an aggressive and bold attacker, while a calm and supportive healer prepares to assist. The serious and introspective dark-haired young man rested his head on his hand, silently contemplating the challenges yet to come. The quiet room held two stone pedestals, each cradling a powerful weapon bathed in soft, filtered light. The narrator highlighted the wooden bow resting simply on the table as a key range weapon for survival. The alert and strategic ranged attacker blocked an incoming arrow, while the defensive fighter crouched with shield against the fierce monster charging at them. A dense purple fog spread thickly, swallowing everything beyond sight in an eerie, suffocating silence. Two opposing pairs stood back to back, separated by a large red V symbol, each ready and determined for the looming confrontation. Three serious figures stand closely together, each facing a different direction, their tense expressions reflecting the weight of the moment. The pensive young man examined the curved wooden staff, resting silently on the stone table before him. Only one thing is certain: the path ahead demands unwavering resolve and relentless determination. The determined, dark-haired young man understood the challenge was set to the hardest difficulty, known simply as hell. The dark-haired young man rested his chin on his hand, lost deep in thought as he contemplated the difficult path ahead. The nervous but determined young man gripped his sword and shield, sweat shining as a confident smirk spread across his face. Sunlight streams through an empty, bright space, casting long shadows across the silent floor. The curious observer focused on the screen read, a glowing message warning that the price was higher than a used item. The screen flickered to reveal the phrase, used item, glowing starkly against the dark, blurred background. The nervous young boy gripped his sword and shield tightly, bracing himself against an unseen and sudden threat. The cautious and critical dark-haired character inspected the displayed weapons, judging the bow as fragile and the antique axe as useless. Sunlight poured over a bright stone wall, casting calm shadows in the empty space. The uncertain young man turned to the glowing sword, reading a prompt asking if he would choose the weapon. The nervous, dark-haired boy hesitated and started to speak uncertainly, sweat dripping from his face as tension filled the air. The nervous but resolute dark-haired boy agreed firmly to choose the weapon, confirming his decision on the glowing selection screen. The tense, black-haired young man gripped his shield defensively, while three others watched him closely in the empty room. The shocked, dark-haired young man reacted sharply to the confident smile of the man in the suit behind him. The prepared young man with sword and shield stood firm as the confident man in suit turned, and said he'd explain each window. An impatient figure told the old man firmly to stop what he was doing. An aggressive blonde-haired man raised his arms threateningly toward the calm dark-haired man facing him. The confident and defiant man questioned why they shouldn't just leave their opponent behind. The confrontational blonde boy challenged the dark-haired boy to prove his weapon's power without hesitation. The confident man in the beige suit suggested it would be better if they helped each other out. The frustrated blonde man turned away from the two dark-haired men and admitted grudging agreement. The anxious dark-haired boy voiced his worries about their next move, tension clear in his cautious tone. The confident and self-assured man pointed to his ear, indicating he heard something important. The confident and assertive standing figure declared he would perform a demonstration. A single speech bubble displayed the word inventory, signaling a crucial moment in their tense journey. The confident and knowledgeable older man revealed a floating digital screen with a loading bar, causing the amazed dark-haired young man to react with surprise. The confident and authoritative older man calmly presented a glowing tablet to the armed and cautious young man, who held up his sword and shield in alert readiness. The concerned and anxious black-haired young man wiped sweat, his blue eyes widening as he processed the sudden and unsettling shift in the situation. A sharp, stylized sound effect cut through the tense silence, signaling a sudden and mysterious event unfolding nearby. The calm and observant black-haired character held a pen and noted the loading screen's progress with quiet approval. The nervous black-haired boy stared intently at the silent dark-haired man standing before him. The young black-haired man marveled as he interacted with a glowing holographic interface, feeling like he had entered a game world. A calm and confident older man manipulated a holographic screen, while a focused young man observed another nearby. A curious figure pressed the glowing status tab, eyes fixed on the screen still displaying the word loading. Large blue characters dominate the empty background, silently setting an abstract tone for what's to come next. The digital interface zoomed in on the status section, drawing attention to vital information about their current condition. The uncertain young man with dark hair gasped softly as the glowing status screen revealed his stats in strength, agility, stamina, and magic power. The worried young man stared uneasily at the calm older man, who smiled confidently beside a glowing holographic status interface. The confident dark-haired man announced the next topic, while gesturing in front of the pillar labeled Community. The worn and serious man gestured toward the transparent screen labeled Community, explaining its importance to the attentive dark-haired figure. The analytical and observant figure noted that the system was divided according to difficulty levels. The screen displayed player counts for each difficulty, highlighting the daunting challenge of the Hell difficulty lobby. The starry sky faded into a pale gradient, signaling the quiet calm after the tense explanations about the system's deadly challenges. The anxious man forced a strained smile, sweat beading on his face as tension lingered in the air. The focused and attentive blonde character glanced sideways, his expression pensive and alert to something just beyond sight. The pensive and quiet girl with long black hair stared solemnly ahead, lost in deep contemplation. The shocked and anxious young man reacted with disbelief, struggling to process what he had just witnessed. The serious dark-haired boy answered affirmatively to the confident man's broad smile, while the suspicious blonde boy watched them closely. The playful dark-haired man smiled with closed eyes, raising a finger near his ear as if listening intently. The concentrated dark-haired boy swiped across the transparent digital tablet, focusing intently on the information displayed before him. The computer screen displayed a navigation bar with Community beside the highlighted top tab, hinting at an online interface. The digital countdown timer displayed 70 hours and 43 minutes until the tutorial started for round 1, day 0. The worried dark-haired boy touched his head, noting there were less than 3 days remaining before the looming deadline. The screen glowed with a futuristic loading message, signaling progress toward an unknown, critical moment in the tutorial world. The digital interface displayed character stats and community board categories, outlining the progress and challenges faced by the determined young man. The focused observer watched the group silently, as the assertive boy raised his hand confidently. A dramatic announcement echoed, revealing the deadly game was an MMORPG. The narrator emphasized continuation, signaling more to come beyond the suspenseful moment. The confident man smirked arrogantly at the serious blonde young man and calm dark-haired girl standing before him. The curious and reflective person considered whether to start a conversation to learn more about the others around him. The assertive blonde-haired man leaned close to the silent dark-haired girl, while a calm man in a suit watched seriously nearby, and a wary young man observed from afar. An initiating contact hesitantly interrupted, saying he needed to get someone's attention. The alert and suspicious blonde-haired boy glared fiercely at the serious and contemplative blue-haired man, while the nervous and uncertain black-haired girl looked on with worry. The cheerful and confident dark-haired boy pointed happily to his temple, radiating bright joy in the moment. The confident dark-haired man gave a thumbs up and said he would start. The confident dark-haired man smiled broadly and adjusted his red tie with calm assurance. The serious and reflective pale-faced man questioned why they were doing something like this. The serious and confrontational dark-haired man pointed sharply and challenged the mocking blonde man about being an elementary school principal. A nervous but honest dark-haired young man revealed he was 26 and enjoyed playing all kinds of games. An urgently curious blonde-haired boy gripped the dark-haired boy's shoulders and asked if he was a pro gamer. The confident blonde-haired boy raised his fist and challenged the cautious dark-haired boy to a game. The dark-haired young man confidently gave a thumbs up, saying he played the game before the large update, surprising the blonde-haired character. A nervous young man raised his hand hesitantly toward a silent woman with long black hair watching him intently. An urgent dark-haired girl shouted at two surprised and sweaty boys who turned their attention toward her. The skeptical and uneasy dark-haired boy questioned the nervous blonde boy about the boss letting him off easy. The blonde-haired man bent forward seriously, explaining his theory that this could be the world of a first. The determined dark-haired young man argued that multiple people existing in the world complicated their situation beyond expectation. The confident blonde man yelled at the calm and stoic black-haired woman, accusing her directly despite her unmoved stance. The calm and analytical dark-haired man gestured to the digital screen, drawing the attention of the alert blonde man, serious black-haired man, and reserved long black-haired woman. The confident young man showed his sword and shield, suggesting they reveal their weapons to decide each person's role. The dark-haired man grimaced in pain while gripping a broken trident tightly in his hands. The determined blonde-haired young man swung his large weapon fiercely, declaring he had chosen this path. The confident man in the beige suit faced two armed men, while a nervous dark-haired man watched their tense confrontation unfold. The dark-haired boy reacted with shock, questioning what weapon Miss Ha was wielding. The focused and determined woman insisted any ranged weapon would do, preparing to make her choice as the digital device loaded slowly. A large metal blade slammed fiercely into the ground, kicking up thick clouds of dust around the tense battlefield. The determined and ready-for-battle girl tightly grasped the sword handle, preparing herself for the next move. The confident antagonist holding a spear gestured firmly to the person with black hair, while the smug blonde man pointed challengingly at them. The nervous young man broke his silence, admitting the party felt overwhelming and uneasy to him. The stylized title graphic boldly introduced the story, setting a serious tone for what lies ahead in this harsh tutorial world. The shocked observer criticized the group's choice, saying everyone used close-range weapons, calling it trash. The calm and slightly evasive man leaned back slightly from the focused blonde-haired man facing him with determination. The unknown interlocutor challenged the listener by questioning if they were unaware of something important. The confident blonde character explained the controls to the nervous dark-haired character holding a spear. The serious and resolute woman firmly refused the anxious, yellow character's request. The dark-haired young man touched his chin, silently counting down 3 days with a pensive focus on the time ahead. The confrontational blonde-haired boy leaned aggressively toward the surprised and uncertain dark-haired girl, while the calm man in the beige coat stood nearby observing. Then, the confident young man with dark hair explained what would happen during the 3 days before the tutorial began. 3 figures stood waiting in a grand hall with towering columns, one gripping a rifle while another held a boom mic overhead. The calm and instructive blonde man warned that tutorial difficulty changes per game, and some games could end immediately after starting. The determined young man with dark hair admitted their group held a disadvantage, prompting a surprised blonde man to ask for clarification. The strategic and cautious blue-haired man warned that any distant attack would lead to their immediate defeat. A massive fire explosion threw a dark-haired girl wielding a sword, a casually dressed man with a hat, and a short-swearing man with short hair into the air. Three characters, a curious dark-haired girl, a worried bald boy, and an anxious dark-haired man in suit, share a surprised glance at something unseen off-panel. The confident and strategic black-haired young man explained that his sword and shield were ideal for battles. The surprised young man held his pole weapon tightly and reacted with shocked disbelief. The energetic blonde-haired boy swung his pipe fiercely, urging his determined companion to tell their enemies to come on without hesitation. The authoritative and calm man in the beige suit held his trident firmly between the prepared dark-haired woman and the engaged dark-haired young man, who said the trident was unmatched. The smug and self-assured man brandished a spiked weapon, declaring himself a true pro gamer to the advancing attackers wielding sword, shield, and axe. The assertive and controlling girl decided to take a strand of the dark-haired boy's hair this time, pulling it firmly behind him. The confident and slightly nervous dark-haired boy declared he would put this on his guard. A calm and observant black-haired girl looks forward, her golden eyes steady and unblinking. The nervous dark-haired boy explained that his sword matched Min trident length to take on the same role, and ordered the others to move aside. The nervous dark-haired boy explained they offered the safest position in their formation. A confident girl challenged the dark-haired boy, accusing him of discrimination and boasting about her fighting skills and belief in gender equality. The determined and focused fighter wielded her katana defensively, insisting the sword was far too long and questioned if someone felt like the main character. The determined dark-haired woman asserted that the weapon was not meant for a woman to wield. The confident advisor suggested the thoughtful girl should follow the advice given earlier. The confident man in suit urged caution and suggested listening to the pro gamer's advice for everyone's safety on hell difficulty. The serious black-haired girl insisted firmly that her point was crucial to the anxious dark-haired boy's understanding. Then the unseen speaker urged everyone to begin training without delay. Soft orbs of light float gently against the encompassing darkness, casting an ethereal glow that hints at unseen mysteries nearby. Glowing orbs drift silently against a purple sky, their gentle light fading into the vast, tranquil distance beyond. The determined dark-haired girl raised her arm and chanted a powerful magical phrase, invoking eternal judgment. The struggling young man gripped his spear tightly, fighting to keep it from breaking apart in the tense moment. Four figures hovered near towering pillars, each voicing confusion about the strange phenomenon before them. The frustrated blonde-haired boy admonished the quiet dark-haired young man to stop screaming every time he attacked. The instructor explained the skill required chanting to activate it, while the skeptical dark-haired girl held her sword, and the nervous, yellow-faced figure watched. The cautious and analytical dark-haired man pushed hard against the sliding door while questioning the use of pierce for a katana. The desperate and pleading older man urged the calm but uneasy dark-haired boy to listen carefully. The determined and introspective dark-haired boy reflected on having learned two new things. The thoughtful dark-haired man noticed that something else was recovering, as the silent blonde man walked away among the columns. The nervous blonde-haired boy gripped his large weapon tightly, sweat beading as the stoic dark-haired boy silently observed from behind. The thoughtful dark-haired young man noted the training wheel's effectiveness for building strength and endurance. He pressed his hand against the wall, thinking that in RPGs, players usually respawn in a village after defeat. A glowing warning declared that players cannot respawn in this place, heightening the ominous stakes for anyone trapped here. The narrator warned that losing the game here would mean death, ending all chances of survival in this merciless tutorial world. A dark-haired man calmly called to Min, who stayed crouched and tense, while a black-haired girl observed silently and a barefoot figure leaned against a column. The determined and aggressive blond man raised his axe and admitted feeling pent up, while the nervous and cautious dark-haired man watched uneasily. The aggressive blond man threatened the calm black-haired woman, warning her to prepare for her funeral, as the worried dark-haired man watched anxiously from behind. A nervous and insightful dark-haired girl said the leader didn't really matter, as a hostile man kicked another person behind her. The calm and observant dark-haired boy noted that players often fight over trivial things like that. The confident blue-haired boy proposed rotating the team's defense if Min became their leader. A confident and subtly assertive dark-haired girl hinted that one of them should take on the leadership role. The nervous but hopeful dark-haired boy smiled faintly, sweat gathering, as he braced himself for what was coming next. A calm dark-haired girl remarked that the silent blue-haired boy seemed mature for his age. A young man explained that his parents warned him he couldn't become a pro gamer if he failed his college entrance exams, since pro gaming careers don't last long. The resilient dark-haired girl rested against her sword, while the tense blue-haired boy stood nearby with his hands on his hips. A single angled yellow text effect appeared boldly on a stark white background. A frustrated blond boy demanded to swap his short weapon for the dark-haired boy's long poleaxe, but the calm youth insisted skill mattered more than weapon length. A worried young man addressed the two standing before him, his concern clear despite the calm composure of the black-haired girl. A gentle dark-haired girl explained they didn't have popcorn or cola available. The calm, dark-haired young man smiled softly, letting out a faint laugh that broke the tense silence around him. 4 towering pillars stood alone in the empty white space, fading softly into the bright background beyond. A determined figure gripped a sword in the right hand and held a shield with the left, readying for combat. The determined and focused leader prepared for battle with shield and sword as the confident and eager fighter declared the fight was finally starting. The determined blond man gripped his weapon tightly, admitting he had never put so much effort into anything before. The confident dark-haired man smiled proudly and claimed he finally captured it on camera. The confident and calm dark-haired girl smiled subtly, holding a quiet assurance that something significant was about to unfold. 3 figures, a curious dark-haired girl, a quiet dark-haired boy, and a determined dark-haired young man, stood watching giant columns as the wind swirled around them. The digital screen announced that the tutorial's first round would start shortly. The system announced that a portal to the tutorial stage was now being generated. 4 armed characters stood alert, ready to defend against the threat emerging from 2 glowing magical portals. A curious and startled observer gasped, suspecting the glowing green energy to be a portal opening before them. The green-haired young man reacted with surprise, questioning the sudden appearance of the hooded figure standing silently behind him. The alert green-haired boy raised his shield, forming a glowing green barrier as the 4 stood back to back, bracing to defend against the impending attack. Green flames surged into the sky as a torn piece of paper drifted slowly through the air nearby. The blonde warrior questioned if all their group training had been wasted, as they formed a defensive stance with weapons ready. The determined, dark-haired young man firmly refused, saying no to whatever was being demanded or expected. 2 sharp objects plunged rapidly from the top edges against the dark, greenish backdrop, signaling an imminent threat. The narrator warned that the portal's activation was imminent, signaling a new phase in their perilous journey. A young dark-haired boy suddenly emitted glowing green energy from his hands, his shock palpable as the power surged unexpectedly. The determined green-haired boy extended his arm, channeling a strong surge of glowing green energy forward, with 3 figures standing firmly behind him. The focused and determined fighter swung his glowing blade in a swift arc, claiming the best play was the more practical choice. The narrator reflected that the past 3 days had been surprisingly enjoyable, despite the harsh challenges faced. 3 figures sit back to back, calm and focused, enveloped by a steady glow of green magical energy. The determined young man braced himself, glowing green particles swirling around his focused form. The intensely focused figure faced the glowing green energy, determination burning in his eyes. Glowing green leaves drift silently against the dark, fading backdrop, casting an eerie calm over the scene. The system announced that the portal had been activated, signaling a new phase in the deadly tutorial world. The system commanded all players to enter the stage within a strict 24-hour countdown. The narrator announced the tutorial stage as Hell Level Floor 1, marking the start of a new, ominous challenge. The narrator declared the Starland's will was breaking, and darkness would soon consume it. A narrow alley loomed under dim light, shadows crawling between the walls as silence pressed heavily on the night air. A vulnerable and cautious figure knelt before a glowing green portal, tension thick in the dark hallway surrounding them. A mysterious and concealed presence leans forward near a glowing portal, its menacing shadow stretching through the dim corridor. The dim corridor stretched endlessly, its brick walls flickering with faint glowing lamps that disappeared into deep darkness beyond. The prepared figure gripped a sword and shield, signaling the start of a challenging tutorial in the dark, silent room. A nervous young man gave a tight smile, his unease barely hidden in the dimly lit room. The determined young man with dark hair smirked confidently, a bead of sweat tracing his resolve despite the looming challenge. A menacing and threatening presence declared that someone's time had come beneath the deep blue night sky. A cautious dark-haired man stepped carefully through a glowing portal, shield and sword ready for whatever awaited beyond the dim hallway. The injured man shouted that the cut really hurt, clutching his bleeding wound in sharp pain. The determined young man held the basketball tightly, sweat gleaming as a confident smile spread across his face. The figure preparing to draw the sword declared that the moment had finally arrived. A textile blue logo glows sharply against the dark background, marking a brief pause in the tense progression. A dim corridor glows faintly from lamps along the brick wall, fading slowly into enveloping darkness. A determined young man with brown hair holds a round shield defensively, ready for whatever lurks ahead in the dim corridor. Debris swirled through the air inside a dark, empty corridor faintly lit by wall-mounted lamps. The determined young man, his shield defensively, and questioned the sudden sensation of goosebumps amid faint green magical particles. 2 sharp beats echoed softly, stirring a rising tension in the silent, empty space. The determined young man's blue eyes glistened with sweat as he smirked, steeling himself against the mounting tension around him. Darkness thickened, swallowing all light and sound in the ominous, empty space surrounding the determined young man. The tense, cautious dark-haired boy raised his sword and shield, readying himself defensively against the shadowy corridor ahead. The tense and focused boy glanced warily over his shoulder in the dim, grid-lined corridor, ready for any threat lurking behind him. The cautious and alert dark-haired boy noticed the glowing portal and questioned if it was still there. A glowing portal emerged in the dark corridor, revealing a small, illuminated rectangular object within its eerie circle. A digital prompt appeared, asking if the tense and focused boy would move to the first-floor lobby or not. White glowing petals drift gently downward against a clear, calm blue sky. The anxious green-haired young man glanced back nervously, sweat beading in the dim corridor's tense stillness. The cautious green-haired young man stepped closer, gripping his sword and shield as the glowing portal cast eerie light in the dark chamber. A hesitant decision-maker pressed the lever, facing a tense choice to move to floor 1 or not. The black-haired young man held his shield tightly, amazed as glowing green particles swirled mysteriously around him. The cautious and prepared explorer advanced toward the glowing green portal, declaring that this was the place to enter. A nervous but relieved young man leaned against the wall, reflecting he had just 1 minute left in the tutorial. The focused and prepared blue-haired man read the next stage instruction displayed on the glowing digital screen, noting the time remaining was just under 24 hours. An unseen voice asked what would happen when the time finally ran out. The game system prompted the player to enter the next stage with a countdown of 23 hours and 59 minutes remaining. A calm young man held a sword and shield, while explaining how auto-regeneration worked in this harsh tutorial world. A determined and skillful figure blocked the sword blade firmly with their palm, steady and focused in the tense moment. A character preparing for action straps a dark band tightly around their palm, readying for what lies ahead. The determined young man stood barefoot, gripping sword and shield, telling himself he would be fine if he returned through the glowing portal. A confident young man with blue hair made a finger gesture and expressed cautious optimism about the plan's feasibility. The alert and cautious blue-haired young man turned sharply, reacting to a sudden, startling noise nearby. A startled but aggressive dark-haired girl leapt suddenly toward a shocked dark-haired man glowing with green energy. The urgent and alarmed dark-haired girl yelled upward, demanding to be lifted immediately. A sudden, explosive impact shattered the tense silence, filling the air with screams of pain and fear. The blue-haired young man grimaced sharply, clutching a small hammer as pain shot through his hand. The nervous, dark-haired young man admitted hesitantly that he supposed the situation was true. The nervous and embarrassed girl explained that the lobby still had the auto feature active, surprising the alert and curious boy listening. The shy and embarrassed girl smiled nervously, her glowing yellow eyes flickering with hesitant warmth. The narrator announced the official start of Q and Q's game, signaling a serious and intense moment. A sharp rush of air suggested something powerful was falling fast toward the ground. A serious and observant dark-haired woman noted they likely wouldn't be returning anytime soon. The thoughtful and uncertain dark-haired boy clenched his fist, quietly considering the possibilities ahead. A digital screen displayed progress on bulletin boards, ranging from easy to hell difficulty levels. A dark background showed glowing Korean text entries, resembling forum post counts for different difficulty levels. It didn't seem like the situation was game over for them just yet. The calm and agreeable dark-haired boy responded affirmatively to the confident, long dark-haired girl's suggestion. A glowing green light traced a shimmering arc as a female caller addressed Ho Opa. The cautious and prepared young man asked the attentive dark-haired girl for a favor, and she immediately inquired what it was. The confident and inviting woman suggested playing together, and the cheerful and agreeable man happily agreed to join her. The intense dark-haired girl touched the anxious boy's shoulder, and he reacted with nervous surprise as their eyes locked in a tense moment. The anxious and focused green-haired girl gazed intently forward, her tense expression revealing alertness to unseen dangers ahead. The nervous and hesitant dark-haired boy leaned close to the tender dark-haired girl, their faces nearly touching in a moment charged with quiet intensity. The calm dark-haired girl stood steady, while the flustered dark-haired boy held his sword awkwardly behind her. A curious and approachable young woman expressed a warm desire to learn more about someone nearby. The nervous, dark-haired young man declared he was leaving and prepared to step forward amid glowing particles. The girl with ponytail released glowing particles around herself, while the dark-haired boy watched her with intense curiosity. Glowing white leaves drifted gently downward, casting an ethereal light against the dark backdrop. A dim corridor bathed in lantern light flickers, as floating particles drift slowly toward a shadowed end. The pensive young man held his sword and shield, gazing up at the glowing wall lamp surrounded by drifting particles. The calm and determined brown-haired young man exhaled deeply, signaling his readiness to face what lay ahead. Then the unseen character focused and activated the glowing status menu one more time. The unseen narrator explained that summoning a spirit forms a contract granting magical power beyond human limits. He examined the glowing timer and realized there were still too many unknowns, including the portal he'd seen earlier. The serious young man studied the glowing holographic interface carefully in the dim hallway, searching for crucial information. The determined dark-haired boy his shield and urged to move forward without hesitation. An unseen force stirs the corridor curtains, their fabric billowing dramatically under flickering overhead lights. The dark-haired young man noticed his status tab labeled him as human, revealing that other races must exist in this world. The determined young man exhaled sharply, sweat glistening on his forehead as he braced himself for what was ahead. 30 minutes passed, marking a quiet but tense stretch in the ongoing trial. The cautious dark-haired boy gripped his sword and shield tightly, startled by an unexpected noise echoing through the dim corridor. The impatient and confused character called out to the moderator, questioning whether the lack of events was a bug after over 30 minutes had passed. The nervous but prepared young man gritted his teeth, holding up his round shield and knife in the dim corridor. The determined fighter holding his shield reacted sharply to a glowing status screen showing battle focus and determination levels. The shocked young man with brown hair raised his knife defensively, startled by the sudden threat nearby. The shocked reacting figure gasped at the status screen showing battle focus and determination at level 1. The seeking young man gripped his weapon tightly, questioning if he had just acquired battle focus level 1. The generic avatar representing the player viewed the battle focus level 1 skill, which increases concentration during battles and extends focus duration. The resolute and focused dark-haired man gripped his weapon tightly, ready to strike with newfound determination. A fierce embodiment of muscle power demonstrates its constant effect, while a confident young boy flexes, showing passive skills stay active once learned. The determined young man activated his battle focus skill and said he was finally getting the hang of battle focus and determination. The curious and analytical dark-haired boy examined the floating skill text and noted that skills appear only when certain conditions are met. The confident young man asserted he wouldn't let his opponent escape this time. The thoughtful and cautious young man held his knife and shield, considering posting his plan on the community bulletin board. A cautious and alert brown-haired character carefully peers down a dark corridor lit by faint, eerie glows, tension gripping him as danger lurks unseen. The determined young man braced defensively with his shield, ready to confront whatever danger waited in the narrow alley. The alert and defensive dark-haired young man dodged a thrown sword and questioned the sudden attack. Alert and uneasy, the brown-haired boy sensed a strange, powerful aura nearby and questioned what it could possibly be. Shadows creep along the corridor, stretching ominously beneath dim, fading lights that vanish into the surrounding darkness. Breathing heavily, the young man braced himself, holding his round shield tightly in the dim alley, ready for whatever threat might come next. Black tendrils writhe silently in the corridor's shadows, twisting beneath flickering lights that vanish into endless darkness ahead. The determined young man with blue eyes braced himself, sweat dripping as he prepared for the next danger lurking within the dim corridor. An intense burst of radiant light suddenly exploded from an unknown source, piercing the surrounding darkness with blinding brilliance. A quiet corner of the ceiling revealed sturdy wooden beams, untouched by the chaos below. A focused dark-haired man raised his arm to block a powerful, bloody attack in the narrow alley, holding firm against the violent assault. The determined and fierce dark-haired boy punched the tree, sending black splatters flying with every forceful blow. Dark liquid bursts out, staining the ground with a spreading splash of deep, ominous blood. FANSIA announced a new collaboration with Endolphin, their logos displayed boldly against a plain background. An unknown attacker crushed the dark-haired young man's foot, forcing him to fall backward, clutching the sudden, searing pain. The tutorial proved far more difficult than the dark-haired young man expected, pushing him to his limits. Dark liquid dripped ominously onto the ground, the scene dim and heavy with an unsettling silence. The shocked dark-haired boy recoiled sharply as a forceful hand grabbed his head from above. The injured dark-haired character clutched his bleeding leg, shouting in agony over the sudden, intense pain. The injured but determined dark-haired young man grimaced, clutching his wounded hand tightly against the cold table. The injured but alert dark-haired man scrambled backward to narrowly dodge, a giant blade crashing beside him. The surprised and possibly injured figure realized an arrow had struck him, stunned by the sudden sharp impact in the cracked ground. The defensive and alert man with sword and shield blocked a powerful sweeping attack, crashing fiercely against the ground beside him. The injured but alert dark-haired young man froze in shock as an arrow lodged deep in his shoulder, sweat streaming down his tense face. The injured but determined dark-haired boy ducked quickly as arrows whizzed past, one embedding in the cracked ground just beside him. The wounded but determined dark-haired young man gasped sharply, surprised to acquire pain tolerance level 1 amid his struggle. A glowing text announced the acquisition of pain tolerance level 1, marking a crucial boost for the tense and determined dark-haired young man. The injured but determined dark-haired young man admitted his pain was real and wondered aloud what would happen if he died here. The injured but determined dark-haired boy dodges arrows narrowly while new ability notifications announce his improved pain tolerance and hemorrhage resistance. A glowing notification announced the system granted pain tolerance level 2 to the tense and determined dark-haired young man. Frustrated and angry, the blue-haired character cursed under their breath, revealing deep irritation with the situation at hand. The determined, yet doubtful dark-haired man bit his lip, questioning if his efforts were truly enough to survive this brutal trial. A reaching hand grasped toward a glowing light, hinting at discovery or hope in the uncertain darkness. The injured and shocked dark-haired man was violently struck and thrown back, blood spurting fiercely from his mouth. Dark liquid dripped steadily onto the floor, spreading a silent warning in the dimly lit space. The strained and exhausted dark-haired character gasped sharply, struggling to catch his breath in the tense silence. The injured and struggling dark-haired boy coughed up blood, fighting desperately to stay conscious amid the suffocating pain. The anxious young man's intense eyes scanned the shadows, sweat trickling down as he braced for the threat lurking just out of sight. The wounded man gasped that he feared dying soon, while struggling forward amid bright projectiles striking the corridor walls. The dark-haired boy slammed onto the ground with a brutal, echoing impact that stole his breath and tested his resolve. The shocked and tense figure's wide eyes fixed on the unseen threat, silently preparing for whatever came next. The intense gradient background thickened the tense atmosphere, signaling that the next moment would demand every ounce of focus and courage. The confident and bold challenger taunted the calm and determined man, who calmly accepted the challenge, while a supportive and hopeful girl cheered for them both. The dark gradient deepened, casting a shadow that swallowed the room in silence and unease. The defensive young man crouched in the alley, using his shield to block the incoming projectiles exploding around him. The fatigued but gaining resilience brown-haired character received a fainting resistance upgrade, feeling relief as the glowing message appeared in the dark alley. The injured but determined dark-haired boy was slammed face-first onto the cold floor of the dim corridor. The desperate and captured blond man struggles fiercely as confident captors hold him tightly with weapons. The exhausted dark-haired boy clutched his shield tightly, gathering what strength remained after the relentless struggle. The confident and radiant dark-haired girl posed with a cheerful glow, surrounded by shimmering particles that lit the space around her. The injured but determined black-haired young man struggled up from the ground, gritting his teeth and refusing to accept defeat. A determined aggressor plunged a blade deep into the side of a hurt victim, blood staining the scene. The injured brown-haired young man clenched his teeth, enduring sharp pain as blood dripped from his mouth. Two dark-cloaked figures grapple fiercely, their struggle marked by a sharp, guttural sound. An arrow struck the ground, embedding itself near a dark, smoky impact zone. Two upgrade notifications appeared, granting bleeding resistance and pain tolerance level 2. The shocked and intensely focused dark-haired man froze, reacting instantly to the sudden, unseen threat closing in around him. The injured but determined young man with black hair and blue eyes launched himself forward in a powerful leap inside the dim tunnel. A glowing green portal shimmers mysteriously in the dim hallway, hinting at an unknown figure's sudden arrival. The injured but determined young man gritted his teeth as an arrow pierced his cheek, refusing to yield to the sudden pain. The glowing portal offered a prompt asking if the viewer wanted to move to the first-floor lobby. Green-tipped arrows fell silently through the dark sky, each one a hidden threat descending from the shadows above. The determined and desperate dark-haired boy lunged forward fiercely, stretching his hand toward the glowing surface with urgent resolve. A quiet darkness stretches endlessly, pierced only by faint, distant stars scattered across the void. A system prompt asked if the user wanted to move to the first-floor lobby. The glowing text declares an awakening at level 1, signaling a new phase in the dark and mysterious space. The darkness deepened, swallowing all light, as the void held its breath in ominous silence. The injured young man clutched his bleeding side, gasping sharply in pain. The injured and struggling dark-haired young man gasped sharply, blood dripping from his mouth in desperate effort to breathe. The exhausted and injured dark-haired young man examined his wounded foot and said he felt like he had just swum across the river Styx. The injured and shocked dark-haired young man collapsed, clutching his bleeding side as pain overwhelmed him. The worried dark-haired young man urgently asked about the fate of the others. The digital interface suddenly triggered loading of the community page, while a loud notification echoed through the room. The shocked and confused blue-haired boy reacted with disbelief to the file labeled top, held before him. The scene darkens to an ominous stillness, signaling the story will continue beyond this suspenseful pause. A stark warning appeared, declaring all illegal copying and unauthorized distribution strictly forbidden and punishable by law. A soft white gradient spreads across the scene, faint light streaks shimmering quietly in the calm stillness. The shocked young man stared at glowing interface text, suspended between two towering pillars. The curious dark-haired boy carefully examined the digital notice board filled with various task difficulties to choose his next challenge. The shocked young man questioned the strange phenomenon before him, struggling to comprehend what he was witnessing. A large, mystical sound effect echoed against the starry blue sky, signaling an otherworldly presence nearby. A dark screen illuminated the words, "Notice Board 11," a silent message in the mysterious tutorial world. The shocked young man reacted with disbelief to the impossible discovery revealed in the dimly lit room. The dark-haired young man clutched his head, horrified, and rejected the impossible truth he had just realized. The calm dark-haired girl stood silently, while the smug blonde man smirked confidently at the serious dark-haired man nearby. A severely injured man leaned heavily against a large pillar, blood seeping from his side and leg. The stressed and determined dark-haired young man pressed hard against the surface, sweat dripping, as he confirmed the truth with a tense nod. An urgent and possibly distressed figure knocked forcefully on a wooden door, calling out to Min Nim. A young man with dark hair clenched his fist in anguish, asking if they truly understood the gravity of their situation. Tall classical columns rise upwards in a bright, ethereal environment, untouched by the chaos beyond. The distressed and isolated young man sat alone between towering white columns, his head bowed in silent despair. The somber and introspective dark-haired boy activated his status screen, seeking clarity in the midst of his daunting predicament. The digital interface highlighted the status tab, signaling a moment to assess current conditions and capabilities. The digital system displayed a skill upgrade, increasing resistance to pain to level 3. 2 digital panels floated, showing increased resistance to abnormal bleeding and fainting effects, signaling vital defensive upgrades in the system. He analyzed the holographic skill interface and noted that every ability listed was passive. The blue-haired young man touched the translucent screen, noting the stage entry countdown showed 19 hours and 12 minutes remaining. The wounded and weakened dark-haired boy clutched his injured side, struggling against the pain as he leaned heavily against the cold column. The determined young man covered part of his face with his arm, silently acknowledging the brutal challenge of the tutorial ahead. The determined dark-haired boy stood firmly before the glowing green portal, gripping his sword and shield in the dim corridor. A tense and possibly anxious figure clenched a fist tightly, shadowed in darkness, as the weight of the challenge pressed down on him. The determined young man braced against the cold stone wall, shield and sword ready, as the flickering torchlight cast shadows on the tense corridor. A barefoot figure stepped forward swiftly, urgency marking every movement on the cold, unforgiving ground. A determined figure stomped the ground firmly, signaling readiness for what was to come next. The anxious and alert young man warned that the first arrow would be released any moment now. The wounded and cautious man gripped his weapon tightly, facing the ominous shadowy figure looming on the wall without a word. The cautious brown-haired boy raised his sword and shield, bracing for the danger lurking in the shadowed alley. The determined young man with sword and shield considered there must be an attack method, just like in a game. A glowing object flickered at the corridor's end, casting eerie light into the narrow, dim passage ahead. An unknown figure surged forward with sudden speed beneath the darkening, tense sky. A large pendulum swung rapidly downward inside a tall, dark tower, its ominous motion cutting through the silence. An alert and signaling figure urgently announced that an important arrival had just happened. A young man with a shield braces himself as a glowing projectile races toward him in a dimly lit corridor. The determined and tense brown-haired boy looked ahead with focus, while the anxious and alert dark-haired boy glanced nervously beside him. The injured but determined young man stomped fiercely near the spike trap, urging his team to target their enemy's ankle. The determined and spirited dark-haired boy shouted confidently in response to the challenge ahead. The determined young man ran forward, sword and shield in hand, ready for whatever awaited him in the dim corridor. The tense and shocked young man stared wide-eyed, sweat dripping down his face as the danger around him suddenly intensified. An attacker's black-tipped arrow pierces the wooden shield held firmly by the defender in white sleeves. The dark-haired young man grimaced sharply as a brutal strike hit his abdomen, sending debris flying violently around him. The injured but determined young man strained to lift a heavy wooden cover in the narrow, dim corridor, bracing for what awaited beyond. The serious and contemplative dark-haired boy stared silently into the dark night sky, his mind heavy with unspoken thoughts. The spear-wielding attacker stabbed the dark-haired boy's forehead, catching him off guard with a sharp, forceful strike. The wounded and desperate dark-haired boy dodged a glowing missile speeding through the dark hallway, reacting in panic. A determined young man raised his shield defensively, declaring he could beat the challenge ahead. The determined and exerting great force dark-haired boy shattered the shield with a powerful, focused strike. The injured and alarmed young man clutched his wounded side, urgently warning that the situation was dire. The determined dark-haired boy lunged forward with a dagger, urgently reacting to the escalating danger. The injured and in pain dark-haired boy was struck violently in the abdomen, blood splattering from the wound. The shocked and pained dark-haired boy admitted he had been hit hard in the attack. The wounded but determined young man crouched in the narrow corridor, clutching his bloodied sword tightly against the dim light. The injured and struggling young man gasped sharply, clutching his wounded side as pain forced him to recoil from the stabbing blow. The injured but determined young man resolved to return to the portal, quickly despite his pain and exhaustion. The determined brown-haired young man vowed to make his opponent regret treating a rusted sword as their pride. The injured but shocked dark-haired man lowered his gaze to the lifeless body pierced by arrows behind him. The shocked and possibly injured dark-haired figure stared at the blood smeared across his hand, struggling to grasp what had just happened. The shocked and injured dark-haired boy stared down at the bloody wound on his chest as blood dripped from his mouth. The injured but determined dark-haired young man clutched his chest and thigh wounds, barely holding on in the dim corridor. An unknown attacker struck the injured and shocked dark-haired man violently in the face, causing blood to splatter as he fell backward in panic. The dark-haired young man recoiled sharply as black liquid splattered dangerously close to his head in the dim corridor. A bloodied young man slammed his sword into the ground, screaming in desperation and questioning if he could level up now. The injured but alert young warrior watched a glowing projectile speeding down the dim corridor, bracing for whatever might come next. The bloodied young man shouted in shock that the arrow had vanished without a trace. A wounded but cautious brown-haired young man steadied his shield and sword, facing the dark corridor with alert determination. The injured but determined young man shouted for a status check and quickly examined the holographic screen near his knives and shield. Curious about the glowing status bar, the figure questioned aloud whether this was truly level 1. Li Ho reviewed his stats and wondered if he had truly been level 0 until now. The wounded but determined dark-haired boy urgently warned to wait before they proceeded. The injured but determined young man held his shield and reflected on how leveling up had changed his strength. The narrator observed how these systems had become remarkably widespread across many worlds and situations. Then the narrator presented 2 distinct pathways to recover from hardship. A ceiling with wooden beams showed faint cracks, casting quiet shadows over the still room. A dark, empty alley stretched silently, with only a barrel and a small object breaking the shadows. The determined and tense figure clenched their fists tightly around the weapon handle, preparing for the challenge ahead. A cautious and strategic brown-haired boy read the glowing status screen, urging escape from arrows and to return for a dungeon reset. The bloodied young man considered risking his life to raise his level, knowing it was unthinkable for anyone sane to do so. The determined young man with dark hair endured the pain and sweat, while warning that his condition might worsen if his fever rises. The injured but determined fighter gripped his sword tightly and shouted encouragement to push forward with all their strength. The alert and cautious dark-haired figure raised his shield, peering warily into the shadowed brick passage, sensing danger ahead. A glowing message revealed that the mysterious deity known as the God of Adventure had taken an interest in the unseen figure ahead. Glowing orbs floated silently near the dim wall, casting an eerie light down the empty, dark hallway. The hopeful and seeking salvation person reached out toward a small light, saying the miracle that saved them waited just outside. 3 sharp shadows split the darkness, forming ominous vertical cracks across the empty black gradient. The bloodied and exhausted young man panted heavily and declared he had succeeded. A glowing notification announced the acquisition of Pain Tolerance Level 4, marking a triumphant milestone in the dark surroundings. The severely wounded young man slumps against the wall, pierced by arrows and bleeding heavily, his strength fading fast. The struggling and determined man clenched his teeth tightly, sweat dripping down his face as pressure mounted around him. A determined and focused hand gripped the sword handle tightly, the blade gleaming sharply in the tense, shadowed atmosphere. The determined and battle-worn young man clenched his fist, declaring this as the most efficient way to level up. The blue-toned stylized Korean title text appeared with digital and circular graphics, signaling the webtoon's identity and mood. The dark, tense background displayed the time and date, marking the 1927 first run on the 28th day. The dim corridor stretched ahead, bricks and faintly glowing lamps fading slowly into an ominous darkness. A sharp tapping echoed in the dark silence, its source hidden beyond the shadows. The exhausted young man panted heavily as he pushed forward through the dark corridor. The injured but determined dark-haired boy sprinted down the narrow corridor toward the eerie purple glow ahead. A large spear hurtled down the dim corridor, cutting through the tense silence with deadly intent. The determined dark-haired boy gritted his teeth, readying himself to face whatever challenge awaited with unwavering focus. The determined and injured fighter swung his glowing sword fiercely as the calm and tactical dark-haired boy threw his shield while advancing. The wounded but determined boy ran swiftly down the dim corridor, clutching his sword tightly with urgent resolve. A glowing puzzle interface with elemental symbols and numbered slots activated silently in the dim hallway, hinting at the next challenge ahead. A concentrated user focused intently as they selected the perception skill from the glowing digital interface. The injured but determined young man sprinted barefoot toward the bright exit, gripping a shield and rod tightly in his hands. The determined young man gripped his sword tightly and dashed angrily through the rubble-strewn stone room. Sharp white slashes cut diagonally through darkness, signaling a swift and unseen attack moving violently across the scene. The wounded but determined young man ran cautiously through the dim brick room, heading straight for a mysterious mechanical device. The bloodied young man leapt fiercely through the doorway, sword in hand, ready to face whatever awaited beyond. Darkness swallowed the scene completely. The world held its breath in a sudden blackout. The injured but determined fighter lunged forward with sword and shield, demanding the next challenger without hesitation. The bloodied young man dashed forward shouting a fierce call, narrowly dodging shurikens that shattered dangerously close around him. The empty dungeon hallway stretched ahead, stone pillars and dim torchlight casting long shadows on broken stones. A determined young man with brown hair examined his growing skills on a transparent screen, reporting he had gained quite a few after 28 days. The uncertain young man wondered who the god of adventure was, hearing the dark voice declare that this god had taken an interest in him. The injured but focused young man checked his digital inventory, holding a glowing jar as he prepared for what lay ahead. An angry and defiant captive accused the calm and imposing captor of sadism and killing out of boredom. The urgent and determined figure held a glowing vial, insisting they had no more time left. A wounded and tense man stood cautiously before a dark entrance, surrounded by rubble and dim lights, realizing he only had 30 days to survive. The warning revealed that the penalty for failing the first floor within the time limit remained unknown and mysterious. A bloodied man with dark brown hair drank from a cup, his exhaustion barely hidden beneath his weary expression. The wounded young man admitted he still hadn't figured out all the arrow trajectories ahead. The unseen narrator explained that from this point forward, the traps would somehow be different and more dangerous than before. The wounded young man ran forward in the dark corridor, relying on his glowing sword and shield to keep moving despite his injuries. The determined young man swung his weapon fiercely downward, shouting that his abilities were not to be underestimated. The determined dark-haired man sprinted through the dark corridor, shield ready, fleeing rapidly from an unseen threat closing in behind him. The desperate and caring woman held the limp dark-haired man tightly, refusing to abandon him despite the dire situation. The determined dark-haired boy ran forward gripping his shield tightly, breathing heavily but pushing through the tension. The injured and startled dark-haired man gasped sharply, shocked by the sudden pain in his shoulder beneath the night sky. 4 sharp arrows sliced through the dark, ominous night, signaling a sudden and deadly threat from an unseen archer. 2 glowing spear-like weapons strike the wounded and incapacitated figure's legs, causing him to collapse to the ground. The determined young man clenched his teeth, sweat dripping down his face as he steeled himself against the rising tension. The tense young man raised his round shield, blocking a barrage of arrows as the wounded brown-haired boy shouted and swung his sword fiercely. A dark gradient fills the scene, silence broken only by an unreadable, ominous sound effect echoing through the air. The injured brown-haired boy grimaced sharply, pain cutting through him like a sudden, cruel sting. The tense and struggling brown-haired male grimaced, clenching his teeth tightly as sweat dripped down his face in mounting pain. The injured but fiercely determined dark-haired young man shouted that his tolerance level was at 8, and this was nothing. An off-panel voice shouted in shock at the sudden appearance of the exit above them. The injured but agile mantis-like humanoid swiftly dodges a barrage of fast light beams in a narrow, dark alley. A dark punch crashes into the wounded and struck dark-haired victim's torso, blood splattering with brutal force. The tense young man grimaced sharply, sweat dripping as pain surged through him. An unknown force violently shatters the dark building's interior, sending debris flying through the air. An unknown source floods the shattered room with a blinding, intense light that overwhelms every shadow and detail. A mysterious and immortal hand pressed a glowing orb, reflecting on an unimaginable future beyond endless, immortal existence. The wounded young man stared tensely at the glowing crater, framed by ancient columns in the dim chamber. The curious and cautious explorer approached the glowing hole amidst the rubble in the dim, columned hall, feeling uneasy about what lay beyond. The injured and confused dark-haired man was pierced by arrows and swallowed by dark smoke, questioning what was happening to him. The confused and cautious dark-haired boy stared at the large crater, questioning what had caused such destruction inside the building. The injured and struggling dark-haired boy fought to keep moving forward, rain soaking his torn clothes and mixing with the blood on his skin. A dark, viscous substance dripped downward, spreading ominously against a cold teal background. The countdown flickered on a black screen, the glowing number 5 marking the 10 seconds before the next event. The narrator stressed the challenge's extreme difficulty, highlighting the daunting obstacle ahead. The exhausted and anxious green-haired character lay down, sweating as tension gripped him in the suffocating silence. The injured dark-haired boy floated in a glowing pool inside the cavern, murmuring that this place was something unexpected. The injured but relieved dark-haired man observed his healed wounds and realized he was saved. The curious and cautious dark-haired figure observed the glowing pit and confirmed it matched the bulletin board's description. The contemplative green-haired character recalled forum chatter about healing fountains and wondered if bosses were the same on harder floors. The exhausted dark-haired young man admitted he couldn't keep going like this anymore. Shock and realization dawned as the unseen speaker silently reacted to the shattered, empty room with closed doors and scattered rubble. A large metal door loomed ahead, marked as the boss room, its ominous presence signaling the next deadly challenge. The empty space between corridors echoed silence, the calm before the storm of their next deadly encounter. The bloodied young man walked steadily beside a large pillar, declaring he was finally at the end despite the bluntness of the moment. A mysterious door glows with a challenge prompt, asking if anyone dares to face what lies beyond. The determined dark-haired young man pointed forward, shouting his unwavering agreement to face the challenge head-on. The wounded but determined gray-haired man approached the open doors, gripping a large round shield as bright light spilled into the dark corridor. The injured but determined dark-haired young man swung a large sword fiercely, ready to face whatever awaited beyond the challenge. An aggressive and dangerous figure lunged fiercely with a glowing weapon, declaring his deadly intent. The wounded young man looked up tensely at the large glowing stone, debris floating ominously above him. A curious and cautious explorer eyed the bubbling orange pool in the rocky cavern and noted it as the boss room. The determined but anxious young man raised his shield defensively against the dark, ominous shapes looming close behind him. The observant and cautious dark-haired man watched the arena intently, noting the tables and central platform with focused eyes. A mechanical ballista stands ready, its tension strings pulled tight against a brick wall in the dimly lit room. The injured but determined fighter dodged a powerful energy slash and admitted the attack was worthy of a boss. The tense question was asked if beating the mechanical contraption was the only way to clear this challenge. A glowing arrow fired from a massive mechanical crossbow pierced the air with deadly intent. The bloodied young man gritted his teeth and cursed his luck as he gripped his weapon, refusing to back down. The hesitant and cautious figure questioned if the lava crossing was a trap meant to force him forward. The determined young man with dark hair smirks confidently, readying himself for the next challenge ahead. The injured but determined dark-haired boy charged forward, clutching his sword and shield, racing through a battlefield crumbling around him. The bleeding young man stood firm beneath the night sky, pain weighing on him yet refusing to fall. The injured but determined dark-haired boy blocked multiple sword strikes with his circular shield, barely managing to hold his ground. The tense dark-haired boy blocked a spear descending from the ceiling, crediting his perception enhancement for saving him. The determined and defensive man crouched, holding a wooden staff and shield, and declared that this challenge was doable while light beams struck around him. A flickering flame touched a tattered cloth stained deeply with fresh blood, hinting at danger yet to come. The defiant dark-haired young man screamed in agony as flames engulfed him, then gained pain tolerance and burn resistance at level 9. A bright, glowing portal suddenly erupted from the pedestal, illuminating the dim brick room with an eerie, mysterious light. The injured and desperate dark-haired young man struggled fiercely against the surrounding flames, his shock barely masking his desperate will to survive. The determined young man with short dark hair swung a large, glowing sword with fierce, focused power. The determined dark-haired boy clenched his teeth, sweat dripping as he braced himself against the mounting pressure. The injured and overwhelmed dark-haired boy winced as fiery arrows struck his back, each wound burning deeper than the last. The frustrated young man with dark hair shouted in anger, venting his fierce frustration at the relentless challenges ahead. The injured and weary boy knelt amidst rubble, flames roaring behind him near a locked door pierced by arrows. The injured but struggling dark-haired boy panted heavily, blood dripping from his mouth as flames burned fiercely on his back. The powerful red demon hand gripped a bright blue glowing sword tightly against a rough brick wall. A mysterious mechanical device with ropes stands motionless against the dim brick wall, its purpose hidden in the shadows of the room. The exhausted dark-haired boy panted heavily, convinced there was no chance he could clear this impossible challenge. The wounded and vulnerable dark-haired boy knelt bleeding, while 3 armed figures stood behind him, and the man in yellow shirt said he thought he'd leave things as they were. The injured but resolute young man knelt silently, surrounded by 3 stern, faceless figures who watched him with imposing, unreadable intent. The determined and tense male glared intensely, sweat tracing his face as the fiery backdrop flared behind him. The calm and authoritative dark-haired man called out to everyone with a serious tone, demanding their full attention. The narrator reflected quietly on a life lived solely for gaming, with no other purpose or passion beyond it. The nostalgic and immersed dark-haired person typed on the keyboard, reflecting that they had enjoyed playing games. The relieved and triumphant gamer raised his fists in celebration, declaring that his gaming skill became his only redeeming quality. In an instant, the solemn young man reflected deeply on his pride and honor amid the vast illuminated space. The frustrated young man slouched before blank monitors, lamenting the dullness and monotony of his life. 2 pairs of hands lay still on the ground, motionless in the somber darkness surrounding them. The distressed young man questioned how his power could feel so weak despite everything he endured. A notification announced the acquisition of pain tolerance level 9 to the player. The bleeding but gaining newfound resistance character earned burn resistance level 1, signaling a crucial step in survival. An aggressive and assertive hand suddenly grabbed the shirt collar of another person, tightening its fierce grip. The narrator vowed not to give in, fueling an unbreakable resolve to overcome the brutal tutorial world's relentless challenges. The injured but fiercely determined fighter shouted a warning and lunged forward, crashing through the breaking ground beneath him. A mechanical crossbow stands fully assembled against a rough brick wall, its intricate parts ready for imminent use. The injured but determined man leapt forward through flames, refusing to yield despite the blood staining his torn pants. The screen shifted to a stark white background, displaying the words announcing the start of the tutorial. The determined dark-haired boy rushed forward, gripping a knife, heading straight toward a spinning crossbow trap mounted on the brick wall. The narrator declared the challenge was simply too hard to overcome this time. The determined young man shouted defiantly, refusing to back down despite the overwhelming odds. A sword struck the brick wall, sending a dazzling burst of light across the room. The determined and fierce shirtless man slashed the ground with his sword, sparks flying and shockwaves rippling outward. The determined and physically strong shirtless young man swung the mechanical contraption, breaking through the obstacle with a powerful strike. The determined young man with dark hair glared intensely forward, ready for whatever challenge awaited him next. Heavy breathing echoed in the dark, signaling exhaustion or anxiety in the tense atmosphere. The physically exhausted and injured shirtless young man panted heavily, struggling to catch his breath after the intense effort. The injured but defiant dark-haired young man panted heavily and smirked despite his bloodied mouth. A glowing screen appeared against the orange brick wall, and the victorious and relieved figure declared he had succeeded. The physically exhausted but determined young man apologized for being the only one to clear the challenge. The injured but defiant dark-clad man shouted angrily, accusing the man of surviving all along and vowing to crush him where he stood. The determined young man with black hair and blue eyes threw a powerful punch and announced they reached the first floor. A soft, eerie wind whispered through the empty space, carrying a quiet calm over the fading blue horizon. A solitary and contemplative white-haired figure stands alone on a grassy hill, gazing quietly toward the distant horizon under a calm sky. A contemplative and solitary pale-haired character stands alone beneath the deepening twilight sky, lost in quiet reflection. Frustration rippled through the still air, as an intense message blinked in blue digital letters against the tech-line background. The reward notification screen announced the player earned 1,000 points for clearing the stage. The system granted 500 points, healed all abnormalities, and awarded a new skill called Protect of the Wind Spirit Level 1. The dark-haired young man scratched his head, confused why his level hadn't increased after clearing the first floor. The dark-haired young man activated Protection of the Wind Spirit, gaining a newly born wind spirit that boosted his agility by 10 points. The anxious young man watched the glowing portal flicker, silently urging the tutorial to continue its deadly instructions. The tense dark-haired boy uttered the word portal, his gaze sharp and sweat betraying his growing anxiety. The silent but tense figure clenched a fist crackling with green sparks, readying for the next challenge in the deadly tutorial world. The determined shirtless boy stepped through the glowing green portal, insisting that staying put would accomplish nothing. A bright blue sky stretched wide, dotted with gentle clouds drifting lazily across the peaceful expanse. A lone, isolated and contemplative dark-haired boy stood in a vast grassy field, silently observing the distant snow-capped mountains under a clear sky. The curious, shirtless young man questioned the nature of the floor beneath him, scanning the mountainous landscape under the bright blue sky. A mysterious and distant girl with rabbit ears walked steadily away, while the observant and contemplative dark-haired boy watched her quietly. The mysterious figure with bunny ears stood facing the mountains and questioned if what she saw was actually a bunny. A character with prominent white rabbit ears and white hair appears against a playful pink gradient background. The surprised white-haired girl with bunny ears glimpsed something unexpected, her face partly hidden by her flowing hair. A cheerful white-haired girl with rabbit ears introduced herself as with a bright and energetic wave. The tense black-haired boy scratched his chin uneasily as the smug white-haired character faced him with a taunting smirk. The uncertain shirtless young man clenched his fist, questioning if the figure was an enemy or something else, maybe not an NPC. A cheerful white-haired girl greeted the dark-haired boy with a bright and friendly hello. The playful white-haired girl mocked the annoyed dark-haired boy by loudly shouting his name, while he wished he could knock some sense into her. A confident white-haired girl declared herself the administrator of the hell difficulty. The angry dark-haired young man told the white-haired figure that he couldn't act that way. The cheerful white-haired girl stretched her arms wide, smiling brightly without a word. The black-haired boy looked up at the bright sky, startled by something unexpected. The calm dark-haired man agreed to the eager white-haired character's suggestion, with a simple affirmation. The curious young man examined the shop menu and marveled that it offered everything from books to toys. The cheerful white-haired girl smiled brightly at the dark-haired figure, greeting him with joyful excitement under the clear blue sky. The joyful white-haired girl laughed loudly, while the tense dark-haired young man watched her uneasily. The playful white-haired girl bit the startled shirtless black-haired boy's shoulder, demanding urgent explanations. The protective and startled dark-haired boy yanked back the white-haired girl with bunny ears, warning her urgently to stop. A calm sky stretched above, dotted with glowing orbs, while an unknown voice simply affirmed that things were good. The confident dark-haired boy revealed his new human clothes, declaring he now looked like a human being. The calm and curious white-haired girl with rabbit ears questioned someone's odd expression, asking what was wrong with it. A curious and inquisitive voice addressed, expressing a question that had been on their mind. A curious voice asked what the situation was, breaking the calm scenery with a sudden question. The calm and authoritative white-haired girl told the curious dark-haired boy to return to the waiting room. He sat quietly, noting he probably didn't realize he stopped feeling hungry. The confident white-haired girl explained she was here to give advice to the people who come to this place. The determined young man spoke about someone known for great accomplishments under the bright blue sky. The confident and possibly sly light-haired character smirked while asking for a favor. The confident white-haired girl with rabbit ears calmly spoke to the dark-haired boy, who listened attentively without interrupting. The determined and urgent white-haired girl said she had one last thing to tell the attentive and curious boy, who asked what it was. The determined white-haired girl declared firmly that this was how things would proceed. The determined and focused dark-haired boy concentrated intensely, his gaze sharp against the dark blue background highlighted by a burst of light. The serious and determined dark-haired boy glares intensely, ready for whatever challenge lies ahead. The energetic white-haired woman expressed curiosity about one last thing to the calm, listening dark-haired man. The reluctant young warrior drew her sword, confessing disbelief that the tradition demanded she kill her own sibling. The contemplative and quiet dark-haired character stared into the bright, empty space with a pensive calm. The relieved white-haired girl admitted she couldn't believe their plan had actually succeeded. The silent and attentive dark-haired boy listened carefully, focusing on the bright space before him without uttering a word. A bright blue sky stretched wide, dotted with soft, fluffy white clouds drifting peacefully overhead. The determined, dark-haired boy spoke firmly, expressing that he understood the situation completely. The energetic girl with rabbit ears clenched her fist and responded affirmatively to the imposing man in suit nearby. The confident black-haired young man said he would head off now. The determined young man raised his shield and summoned a glowing green magical barrier to defend against unseen threats. The focused and cautious dark-haired boy faced the glowing green portal as an urgent voice called his name. The cheerful white-haired girl raised both fists and cheered encouragement to the unseen listener under the night sky. The determined young man charged forward with a glowing shield, announcing he would see them later. The page displays a stylized title graphic with blue Korean text on a white background, setting a calm and neutral tone. A glowing green magical portal materialized between towering pillars in the dim, silent second-floor lobby. The alert and reactive green-haired man dodged a sudden burst of green magical energy near the classical columns. The dark-haired character studied the glowing tutorial screen, noting the time left in round 1 and the floor's status. The determined young man with dark hair glared intensely toward an unseen target, while a glowing pillar pulsed behind him. A glowing digital interface asked the contemplative character if they wanted to proceed to the next stage. The thoughtful dark-haired boy wondered if that meant he could finally finish this challenge. The serious and focused dark-haired boy fixed his blue eyes ahead, determination etched deeply in his gaze. The determined but anxious dark-haired boy resolved to clear the second floor and planned to ask about it later. The alert and focused young man with dark blue hair suddenly reacted with surprise amid towering pillars. A white table with multiple chairs sat empty, quiet and still in the dimly lit room. The carefree and happy dark-haired boy jumped joyfully onto the bed, arms raised and eyes closed with a big smile. The dark-haired boy sleeps peacefully, a relaxed smile spreading across his face with a small trail of drool at his mouth. The exhausted dark-haired boy murmured that he only needed a little more time before waking. Shadows flickered faintly in the darkness, swallowing all but the vaguest outlines in the ominous void. The empty hall stood tranquil, bathed in soft light and framed by tall, white classical columns. The calm dark-haired boy lies motionless on a bed, in a bright room framed by white pillars. The startled dark-haired boy suddenly sat up from the bed, sweat beading on his forehead, as a sharp sound echoed in the quiet room. The anxious dark-haired character read the countdown timer showing just over 30 hours left in the first round. The dark-haired boy wondered aloud if he had changed since arriving in this strange place. The reflective young man admitted those solitary days of drinking felt far behind him now. The cool and admired dark-haired boy stared intensely ahead, drawing silent admiration from those nearby. The focused young man clicked the computer mouse, eyes locked on the screen as he prepared for the next challenge. The determined and burdened young man reflected silently, realizing he had returned to a game where he had truly risked everything before. A lonely and contemplative dark-haired boy sat hunched on a white bed, in a vast hall framed by towering pillars. An impatient and commanding voice admonished that it was no time to be moping around like this. The determined and focused dark-haired young man urgently activated the glowing digital interface's status command. A bright sky stretched endlessly, its hues shifting gently from blue to yellow without a single cloud in sight. The digital screen displayed detailed effects and strict requirements for the battle focus skill at level 7. The curious young man considered if his skill had become active and realized it required no mana to use, pondering its mental endurance limits. The confident dark-haired boy smirked as he smoothly drew his sword from its sheath, ready for the battle ahead. The determined dark-haired boy sprinted through the vast hall, weaving swiftly between towering white pillars. The energetic and focused dark-haired young man swung his arm sharply in a strong diagonal motion. The determined dark-haired young man steeled himself, insisting he couldn't lose now. The determined young man with dark hair swung his large sword with force, ready to face whatever challenge awaited him next. The exhausted young man collapsed near a tall pillar, breathing heavily as he tried to recover from his ordeal. The exhausted dark-haired young man admitted his mental strength could only last about 5 more minutes before he gave out. The shocked dark-haired boy's bright blue eyes widened as sweat dripped down his tense face. The determined dark-haired young man activated the auction interface, insisting they use it consistently from now on. The narration explained that the auction window was reserved for those who had cleared the first floor. The observant and attentive dark-haired character studied the floating auction menu listing weapons, armor, food, decorations, and toys. The focused young man with dark hair studied the glowing book, declaring the starter choice was about to be revealed. A close-up reveals a warning that cat collars with bells provoke cats to attack even their owners. The casual and slightly playful dark-haired young man fell backward, reaching out while teasing that the bed felt far away. The determined and resolute young man clenched his fist firmly, gazing upward with unwavering focus. A lone dark-haired boy stood silently in a vast hall, surrounded by towering classical pillars. The digital countdown timer displayed the second round would start in 71 hours and 59 minutes. The young man calculated the total waiting time as 3 days plus 30 days for the tutorial, summing up to about 33 days. The reflective and strategic thinker said he didn't need to struggle for a new job to keep his membership here. The focused blue-haired character selected a task category on the digital community notice board screen. The focused dark-haired young man sat silently, his mind deep in thought as calm blue eyes scanned the room. A neutral hand selected the notice board category on the futuristic digital screen. The serious and focused young man gazed intently ahead, sharpening his resolve for the challenge that lay before him. The tense dark-haired boy's blue eyes widened as shock gripped him, sweat beading on his forehead in sudden disbelief. A confused individual expressed surprise, questioning what had just happened. A dark screen flickered with faint text, an unknown voice murmuring the fragment of people. The shocked figure reacted to the Hell Notice board increasing its count, signaling danger ahead.